Steve.
Woo, woo, woo.
All right, need to unmute, I think. But then other than that, we're looking pretty good.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yes, let's go.
Minor detail, I was on mute. Okay, did you want me to just introduce myself, Sherry?
So I was looking through our messages that we went back and forth in, and I couldn't see where you had sent me an introduction. Maybe,
okay.
Yeah, so go ahead if you'd like.
All right, sure. Well, hi, everybody. This is Steve Markman. Happy to be here. I am going to today discuss, as it says, how to land more speaking engagements and leveraging free gigs into paid engagements. So a few words about myself, and we'll make this hopefully a fun, interactive session. So I have been in the speaker/conference business for 30-something years. More years than I want to admit to, right? So I have run Markman Speaker Management, my firm, which I call a speaker placement agency, now in its 27th year. And I spent the first 15 years of my career either working for people or for myself, creating the content and producing major conferences worldwide. I headed up the conference divisions of the Conference Board in New York City, then relocated to Boston, where I headed up the Comdex series of conferences. For those of you in technology, you will know about it. For those who aren't, it was the largest trade show of any technology sector in North America by attendance. So at its peak, it attracted 200,000 people. That's not over 5 years. That's to one show over the course of 4 days. Usually held in Las Vegas, the only city in the world that could accommodate that many people at that time. And like the dinosaurs, it imploded about 15 years ago. And then I went to Giga, another firm, to head up their conference division. When I started my own firm, I was continuing to do the same thing for Clemson University, IDG, a whole bunch of other people, all topics. And then IBM came to me and asked me to get some speaking engagements for their senior executives. And like any good consultant, when they asked me the question, can I do that? I said, sure, I can do that. And I actually had done a bit of that, but that wasn't my mainstream business. It was producing the conferences. It was recruiting the speakers. But it was a very easy transition to make from recruiting speakers to representing speakers. And so that embarked me on a change of course. I pivoted when pivoting wasn't the thing to do yet. This was 26 years ago now, after a year of doing the other thing. And long story short, very successful pilot program, and I've been doing that ever since. And that is what I did for IBM, I now do for individuals of all walks of life, business, non-business, all health subjects, you name it, all the way up to Fortune 500 companies like continuing with IBM, Bank of America, PayPal, Bro Systems, companies like that. And many, many small, mid-sized firms, and all with the same theme, which is getting these companies or individuals non-paid speaking engagements. Because, as you know, or maybe you don't know, a lot of people are under the mistaken notion that, they wake up one day and they go, I want to be a speaker, because those people get paid a lot of money. But I submit that 90 to 95% of all speaking engagements worldwide in any given year are unpaid. There are many paid speakers. There's obviously many of you are paid speakers, but most conferences, especially the public conferences as opposed to the corporate conferences, those do not pay fees. They'd go out of business if they had to pay everybody. So the question is, why speak for free? And for those of you who do that, you know the answer, because you are speaking for value. You're not just speaking for money. There's some exchange of value. And if you have a coaching business or you have some kind of a business that allows you coaching, consulting, books to sell, then you know that speaking will create value for what you're saying, and it's actually will create income, but it's future income. You're just not handed a check for that particular day. Okay, so that's basically what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how to leverage those to speaking. So we're going to mostly talk about unpaid engagements, but then I'm going to also talk about how to leverage those into paid speaking engagements. And we're going to try to make this interactive. So I would say I'll do probably the first maybe 4 or 5 slides where I'd like to be uninterrupted, just to give you a flavor for what I'm talking about. And then when I give you the signal, I'll open it up to everybody to speak their mind. If you have a comment, I don't mind being interrupted at all. If you have a question, I'd rather you ask now when it's fresh in your mind than an hour from now when you sort of lose the momentum. So if it's something I'm going to cover, if you ask a question, I'm going to actually cover it in a few minutes. I'll let you know. Sit tight. I'm going to cover that. If not, I'll obviously answer the question. Okay. So let's get started. Does everybody hear me okay? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Everybody hears me shaking hands. Okay, good. Excellent. All right. So. Okay. Went a little bit too far. So we're going to talk about first why speak, right? So a lot of people, they decide they want to speak, but they're not really sure why. They may want to make money. There's all kinds of different reasons, right? So let's talk about a few of those reasons why most people speak. So for the people that I work with, most of the speakers speak because it's a development of business, right? It's a way to generate qualified leads, because you should be, at least if you're using speaking as a business development effort, you should be talking to prospective customers and clients, people who will eventually, either this year, next year, put it aside for when they need it, they will hire you. So it's a lead generator. It's also a way for personal branding, right? It's a way to show what you know and create a brand for yourself. You're going to demonstrate your expertise by speaking. You're going to gain increased visibility and branding for your personal brand and your company brand. And most of us work alone. We're individuals, at least for the folks that I see that Sherry works with, that I believe are in this audience. And so you want to be able to say, hey, I have a personal brand, but I also have a business brand, because you may be the business, but you have to exude some sort of a way for people to say, oh yeah, that person, Mary Smith, she's the blank person. So you get people to know who your personal brand is and your company brand. And speaking is a great way to get that word out. Next bullet is obtain advertising before you speak. And what I mean by that is, what happens is a lot of people, they say, I'm going to get my promotion out to 5,000 people. They may be doing their own webinar, or they may be doing it like I'm doing here, something for another producer. And what happens is, many times I'll get calls, as will many of my clients, I'll get calls from people who can't even register because they're not available for the talk that I'm about to give in a week or 2 or 3. But they see that I have a speaker management company or a speaker placement company. Well, they don't even know what it is. So they go and they Google it and they go, oh, you know what? That's something that I need. So that happens more often than you may think. Just having your name in a agenda, I started to say brochure, showing my age. Brochures don't exist anymore for the most part, but in the agenda, and that will help create lots of exposure. And then last but not least, for many of you, it's an income source. It could be your primary source of income. It could be extra income. Okay. So I'm going to do a little philosophy quiz here. This is sort of a rhetorical quiz. So people can ask themselves, they should ask themselves, when is it okay not to get paid to speak? I ask that question because I have among my services, besides helping people get speaking engagements, I also have a speakers bureau. And the speakers bureau is predominantly paid speakers. I have about 70 on my roster. Those 70 speakers, I would say 70% of them will not speak unless they're paid. They've been doing this for a long time. Many of them have written multiple books. And I honestly think they would charge their mother to say hello. There is a very large, if you'll pardon me for saying this, is a very large ego that gets in the way, and they are not going to speak unless they get paid. Okay? So that's B, right? Never. Why should I when I don't have to? Okay? That works not always so well in a recession. But A is always. So there are many people, people I work with, for the most part, they speak to generate leads for their mainstream business. It's a marketing, business development, thought leadership. Those are the three legs of the stool: marketing, business development, thought leadership. Those are the reasons why people speak. Many, many people, the vast majority of speakers. B is never. Why should I when I don't have to? C is sometimes. So it depends on A, what are the chances of add-on mainstream business, which I call delayed or future income, which I mentioned earlier. And B, what are the chances of add-on speaking business? We'll talk about that in a second, what I mean by that. All right. So why accept non-paid engagements? Why should you accept non-paid engagements? So there's actually three main reasons. I have two listed here. So, and then I'll just speak the third. So the first one is to add to your speaking resume. So even if you're one of those people who wants to primarily get paid to speak, for whatever reason, you have a presentation that allows you to get paid and allows you to make enough income to get paid and rely on that presentation to make you a professional speaker and have most of your income derived from speaking, you still need to have a resume, a speaking resume, meaning people will come to you and they will say, so tell me where you've spoken. They shouldn't have to, because you should have a list of where you've spoken. But many times in just an initial conversation, they'll say, so tell me, where have you spoken? Or you should drop some names. So to have that resume, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get these paid gigs if you've got at least a start of a half a dozen unpaid engagements that you can then add to this speaking resume. And I will tell you that very rarely will someone say, so did you get paid for those or not? People don't ask those questions. It's sort of an indelicate question to ask, right? So they'll just say, where have you spoken? You don't have to tell them whether it was paid or not. It's not germane. Secondly, it will impress potential buyers in the audience for paid engagements at their own organizations. So what I mean by that is that if you are speaking at the XYZ Association and there are 300 people in the audience and they're all from different companies, each and every single one of those 300 attendees represent a potential buyer who could bring you into their company for their HR meeting or their leadership meeting or some senior executive meeting, or it could be a medical association. They want you to come in and talk about nutrition, whatever your topic is. Those are all buyers that could bring you in for paid engagements if that's what you're looking for. So that's another great reason to accept a non-paid engagement to get you there. And then the last thing is basically it's future income. Again, what I referred to before as future income or delayed income, where if your business is primarily a consulting, coaching business, now you have an opportunity to get clients who will pay you as a consultant or a coach, bring you in for your business services, right? But you wouldn't have gotten that gig, that service gig, if you didn't accept this non-paid engagement. All right. So what are the types of paid engagements? As you know, you could be a keynote speaker. Typically large conferences have one or two keynote speakers, sometimes three. They might have opening keynotes for 2 days of a large conference, a lunch keynote. They also might have an ending keynote, what many people in the business call an end note. It could be a paid workshop. which is something that's more in-depth, hands-on, usually 2 hours or longer. And those are typically paid. They should be paid. You're investing a lot of time. You're probably going to make it customized. And therefore, I believe you should get paid for that. Specialized/technical events. By that, I mean, say, you might have a situation where there's you have expertise in a software program, some computer program, those sorts of things. And those sorts of technical things are typically paid for by the organizer. Chapter meetings, not the norm, but possible. So you could speak at I'm based in Boston. So let's say it was the Boston chapter of the Society for Human Resource Management. You have an HR or leadership conference presentation. Some chapters will bring you in and pay your travel expenses, which hopefully will be an issue again one day. And they may pay an honorarium. It's not going to be a huge amount, but they will pay. They've set aside a budget for bringing people in from the outside. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about the extras needed for paid engagements. But before I do that, let me, I'm trying to see if I can get back screen here. I want to see if there are any questions. So
nothing has come up in the chat yet.
Okay. So yeah, I didn't know if you mentioned it, Sherry, but if anybody has any questions at all, because I'm on my full screen and I didn't want to have my little head in the corner there for me to be distracted by myself. So I'm not necessarily seeing a hand raise. We can do an open Q&A when I'm done for sure. But for now, please use the chat room if you have any questions at all. And from here on, Sherry, feel free to interrupt me with anybody's question, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, great. All right, so let's get back to this. Okay. So now we're going to talk about what are the extras that are needed for paid engagements. By extras, I mean, what do you need to have that you wouldn't necessarily need if you were doing an unpaid engagement? So a speaker one sheet is sort of standard in the industry, as most of you know. It's basically, could be 2 sheets, but it's like the resume thing. People really would prefer you having 1 sheet. And it lists the titles of your presentations. It might have a sentence or 2 of what they are, has your photograph, and it has testimonials. I can't underestimate or overestimate, I should say, how important audience and organizer testimonials are. So if you have a half a dozen comments, you might have 30. But if you have a half a dozen really good ones, put those sort of top 6, 7 testimonials on your 1 sheet. And they should be from people who have actually heard you speak. There's a tendency for some people to want to put down, Mary is the best coach I've ever seen. When they're not, people who are looking at the 1 sheet are not looking for your coaching service for this purpose. They're looking to hire you as a speaker. So you want to be able to have your testimonials from people who have either heard you speak or the organizer of the presentation event that you spoke at. And you should have a speaker video. And what I don't particularly like, and many people will disagree with me, is I like to have what I call the speaker/demo reel. What I don't like is what people call the sizzle reel, which really doesn't demonstrate the expertise or the speaking ability of the speaker. It's, looking at the audience and it's fireworks going off and music and people running onto the stage and running off the stage and doing all kinds of stuff in the audience, in the aisles. I don't like it. I don't think it does anything for the speaker. I don't think, as a former conference organizer for many years, that that's something conference organizers really care about. They simply want two things. They want someone that is a good speaker, that will be interesting and entertaining and articulate, and they want someone that has something substantive to say. And if you can get that across in 3 to 5 minutes, and we're talking about paid speaking engagement, we'll talk about whether you need it for unpaid in a few minutes, then you need to do that. You need to have a video that does the stuff that I just mentioned. All right. All right, so there are 7 steps or 7 elements that I've come up with to obtain speaking engagements. By the way, Sherry, I know you've been busy all day and probably didn't notice. I had meant to send it to you last week, but this
it's
last
in
night late.
Dropbox.
You got it. Okay, so yep. So in the Dropbox, you will find this slide, so you don't have to write it down. 7 steps to obtaining speaking engagements, and I'm going to talk about each of the 7 in this session. But for now, I'm just going to put this slide up, read each one, and then we'll get into the specifics of each step. And by the way, this is not chronological. This is not in order of step 1, step 2, step 3, nor is it in the order of importance. It is simply 7 elements. Might be better if I renamed it elements now that I'm thinking about it. But these are the things you need to do. They could be steps, they could be elements, but they're things you need to do. Okay, so number 1, I'm not even going to say number because that's just going to make you think that that's more important. So you need to develop a proactive speaker placement program. By that, I mean you need to make sure that you are proactive, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're doing it for with someone else's help. You need to be proactive. It is very competitive. So you know how they say that, you know, speaking is one of the most feared events that someone could do in their life, public speaking. But as you know, because you are all speakers, there is a lot of competition. There are a lot of people who want to speak. So you need to get above the competition. And in order to do that, you need to be proactive. You need to go out and find these speaking engagements. They will find you. They will come to you occasionally. But if you want to make a good amount of money from speaking, or use speaking as a way to develop your business and marketing, to have more speaking engagements, you need to be proactive. 2, decide which subject areas you should target for increased visibility. Next one is speak to the right audience. Next one is decide on the geographic area to target. Next one is create high impact presentations. And the corollary to that, which I'll discuss when I get up to that one, is create high impact speaker proposals. Learn the process for submitting a speaker proposal, and then follow up continuously and persistently. Very important. All right, so let's talk about each one. Step 1, you want to develop a proactive speaker placement program. As I said a second ago, you need to go out and find these engagements. And once you do, and we're going to talk about how do you do that, right? That's what mostly I'm going to be talking about. How do you find these speaking engagements? Okay. But for now, we're going to say you need to do that. And once you get these engagements, you need to be prepared. So you have to, before you get started in earnest in doing this, or you ramp up a campaign, you need to have presentation titles. It could be 1 presentation, it could be 15 presentations. You need to have abstracts. You need to have a bio, you need to have video, and you need to have engagement lists. So let's talk about each of those briefly. If you have more than 1 presentation, I personally like that idea. I like people who, I like to tell people that they should have 15 presentations if they can. People say, well, I was told, you need to focus. You need to be more specific. And yes, you do need to be specific, but you could actually have 10 or 15 specific presentations. You don't need to. You could have one. I'm just saying that it's not a bad thing, because a lot of people preach that it is a bad thing. And you need to have an abstract. So for those of you who've been in the business a long time, you've heard the word abstract many times. It's a holdover from the days of academia when people wrote, professors wrote papers, and those were abstracts. So, in the academic world and in the scientific world, they're still being used. What it is very simply, it's a summary. It's a 2-paragraph, 3-paragraph, could be even 1-paragraph summary of what you're going to talk about. Bullet points are usually part of it. And it is absolutely crucial to have that, because if you don't have that and you just have the title, people are not going to know exactly what you're talking about. And the decision by the event organizer on whether you speak or not is going to take, or at least be considered seriously, it's going to take about 45 seconds. And they're going to look at your presentation title, your abstract, and your bio. That's the first thing, and it may be the last thing that they look at. Those are the 3 most important things. And we'll talk about what kind of bio in a few minutes. Video. You have to have a video if it's paid. Do you need a video if it's an unpaid engagement? No. I'll talk about that in a minute. Engagement list. Crucial. You need, doesn't have to be a long list. You may be just starting out. You may have 2 things on a list, but you need a list of public engagements that you've had, either for a company or for an association or for a conference created by an independent producer like Sherry. You need to have any place you've spoken on a list. And if you've had 100 engagements, you don't need to put all 100 down. You can put down top speaking engagements and put down 10 or 15 of those 100 where you think people will recognize those names. It's all about name recognition. And then just dedicate the time. It's very time consuming, very. And you need to dedicate the time if you want to make it an effective initiative. All right. Step 2, decide which subject area or areas you should target for increased visibility. So if you're a coach or a consultant, you will usually know where your business is heading based on what are the subjects that you have put out there, but also what are the sort of subheads, the secondary subjects or subheadings of overall subjects. So your main subject might be leadership, but then you have a talk on how executives need to attract the right leaders to their companies, whatever the case may be. So from your clients and your customers what some of the hot buttons are. And you might want to talk about an established line of business because you want to continue to build your reputation in that line of business. But you might also want to talk about your new business, right? You might have a new line of business, and that new line of business is something that people are going to say, hey, I would really like to learn more about. And that could be the type of business that will grow, and you can test it. You can test it by having presentations on that particular subject area and see what the reaction is, right? So that would be also a good thing for people to see. All right. So now, step 3. Okay. We're going to now go to speak to the right audience. So who is the right audience? I talked earlier about prospects and for your clients and customers, but they're not always the people who are going to bring you in for a presentation. They could be the recommenders, right? Somebody goes back to their office and they say, hey, I just heard Joe. He gave an unbelievable speech just on the topic we were talking about this morning. We should bring him in to speak at our annual whatchamacallit conference. Or it could be a conference organizer and one of the assistant conference directors is in the audience, and they bring you in. You can choose by industry and by function. So industry obviously is financial services with sub-industries like banking and private equity. It's manufacturing. It's the furniture industry. Function, by that I mean the functions of corporations. So strategy, IT, human resources, the various subheads of those departments, accounting, within finance. So those are by industry and by function. And depending on where your level of expertise is, you might say, what I talk about is fits any industry, any function, not any function, because it's going to not always be any function. Although if it's something that's a motivational speech, yes. If it's a purely motivational speech, if you went up Mount Everest backwards on a donkey, then probably, if it's a motivational speech, then it doesn't matter what the person's function is or what their lot in life is in terms of their occupation. They're going to probably find it interesting. But if you have a specific industry or function where you have a lot of experience in, then you might want to target those particular industries and functions for conferences, as well as the ones that have all industries and all functions. And the types of audiences obviously reflect the types of kinds of presentations you can give: solo presentations, panels, workshops, webinars. Obviously, everything is virtual now. They will probably be virtual, in my opinion, for pretty much the rest of this year, in large part. We could talk about that later. All right, step 4. So it looks like we have some questions or comments. Sherry, do I see that right or no?
There's a lot of sharing your document and things like that are going on in the chat mostly. Yeah.
Okay, so nobody has any questions. All right. Is everybody still awake? It's one of the dangers. I've always said this. What's that?
I'm still here.
Yes. All right, good. I always tell people, try not to speak after lunch. So Sherry asked me, when do I want to speak? So I picked this slot, which is after lunch. So hopefully, my biggest fear is always that if it's at a hotel, they serve turkey, which has the chemical that puts people to sleep, right? So hopefully you didn't have turkey for lunch, and you're all awake, and you're all just so mesmerized by my talk, because it's starting with Sherry's very nice comment telling me that this is going to be an exciting session. She already set the tone, so I have this reputation I have to live up to now.
Jeff Klein did ask if there was a market for motivational material. I know your arena is primarily the conference arena, and we're fine with that, but that was a question that came up.
Yeah. So conferences have, the conferences that I deal with, they all have motivational speakers at one point or another. So even though the speakers are for the most part subject matter experts, on my speakers bureau, I do have several people who are considered motivational speakers. So all of this does apply to motivational speakers as well. Absolutely. It's really getting to have the package that you need to speak, whether it's a motivational talk, whether it's a subject matter talk. Okay. So we go to step, I think I did step 3 already. Yes. So, whoops, we go to step, did I do 3? Yes, we did 3. Now we're at 4. Okay. All right. So you want to decide on the geographic area to target. So obviously pre-COVID, this made a whole lot of difference. Now we're all speaking into a little box. So the assumption that I'm going to make is that we will, hopefully by the end of the year, early next year, start to move toward in-person again, God willing. And so I will present this as if that were the case. And when that happens, you want to target a decision on local, regional, national, and international. It makes a difference mostly to where you want to have business or if it's paid. So if it's a paid engagement, if someone's going to pay you $5,000, $10,000 and airfare to go to, UK or France or Belgium, you're going to probably go. There's no reason not to go, unless it's in some place where, there's a security issue. But if that is not your primary reason for speaking, if it's to get clients and customers for your coaching or consulting or sell books, then you probably want to limit your speech, your presentation, to a geographic area that mirrors where your clients and customers are. That could be in the Southeast U.S. It could be in the state of Georgia only, or it could be anywhere in the United States, or it could be literally international. I have clients that will get on a plane for an engagement that I get them in Paris or Shanghai or wherever. Step 5, you want to create high-impact presentations. So what kinds of presentations are there? There's actionable information. There's the subject matter expert presentations. You can talk about how to do this, how to do that, trends, and use real-world case studies always where you can. Next, which is what we just discussed, it could be a motivational, and they're not mutually exclusive. It could be trends and how to, and still be motivational. Or it could be purely motivational, right? It could be the example I gave before of the person that went up Mount Everest backwards on a donkey, singing a song. And they came back to talk about it and how that was, motivational for them and hopefully for others. So you want to tailor the speaker proposal to the audience. And what that means is when you are doing a proposal or the presentation, and the proposal both have to be tailored to your particular audience. So if your audience is made up of financial executives, then you should have case studies of the financial world, things, facts, trends that relate to that particular audience. Where applicable and where you can, a co-presentation with a customer or client is very much looked at as a great thing. It mollifies any kind of perception that you're going to have a sales pitch, that you're going to talk about your business. If you have a client there that you can introduce, talk about the programs that you may have implemented. So that's promotional right there and helps with business development. And you can talk about sort of the overview. What are the trends? What are the how-to? And here's one of my clients or coaching clients that has implemented what I taught them, and here's what they can talk about. The last but not least is leave the sales pitch home, right? You want to be able to have an objective, not subjective presentation. You don't want a sales pitch. That is the kiss of death. So in 27 years in running my business, I've only had probably 3 or 4 complaints from a conference organizer about an executive that I sent to a conference. And many times these are, corporate executives, directors, vice presidents of companies, or they have their own business, and they did not do what I told them, threatened them to do before they went, which is to not have a sales pitch. And they basically talked about, 10 or 15 minutes about their business. And that is the kiss of death to the audience. They don't want to hear that. Now, there is room for that if the organizer says, okay, as Sherry did, last 5 minutes, talk about, your business, what you might offer the attendees, that sort of thing. That's fine. But if you're not given permission to do that, don't. That is my advice. All right. Step 6. You want to learn the process for submitting a proposal. And so when I finish with this slide, I'm going to talk about some of the things that you need to do to have in that proposal. So there are formal processes and informal processes. So the formal process is call for speakers. And I don't know how many of you have ever filled out a call for speakers. I suspect many or most of you have. But basically, it's they call it sometimes a call for papers, again, from the old days of academia and science. But basically, it's a call for speakers. So a big conference, they can't figure out who all the speakers are, or who all, they don't want to go back into their archives and just have the same speakers they had before. So what they're doing is they're getting as many speaker proposals as possible. They put out a call for speakers, usually via email and on their website, and people can respond to that, and they put in their information, their bio, their presentation title, the abstract, all the things that they need, and then the conference organizer or organizers, oftentimes if it's a big conference, they have a committee to decide these things, and then they will make their choices from there. And then there are keynotes, and then there's everything else. So the people who decide on the keynote speaker that I spoke of earlier, some of you may have been keynote speakers, I'm sure you have. You know that the person who decides on a keynote speaker at a conference or even at a company is oftentimes not the same person as the person who does the other 25 breakout sessions. It's usually the person who heads up the conference division. Title could be Vice President of Conferences, Director of Conferences, or it's a committee, or it's the CEO. And then everything else, all the other speakers are done by the conference staff. So the thing that you want to be able to do, as I mentioned before, is a high impact speaker proposal, not just a high impact presentation, but a high impact proposal. So you want to have actionable information, but you also want to be able to let people know that that's what you're going to do. So again, you do that through the compelling abstract. The abstract is key. I like to have 2 paragraphs and 4 or 5 bullets. The bullets are takeaways. So first sentence, you set the stage by saying 24,000 Americans a year eat corn, whatever the case may be. And then you have, in this session, attendees will learn about blah, 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 1 or 2 or 3 sentences, and then you'll have takeaways. You'll come away from the session learning bullet, 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 3 to 5. And that's important to have, that compelling abstract. Then you want to have a compelling speaker bio. Speaker bio is different from the bio because the regular bio talks about your whole career. You want people to know about your career, but also your speaking career. So this is an opportunity for you to include some of the places where you've spoken before, if you have. And the first place that you should list is the industry that you are speaking to now for this presentation, or that you are hoping to speak to in this proposal. And then you want to have videos. So the videos are, my philosophy on videos is this. If someone requires you to have a video, even on an unpaid engagement, which is becoming more and more, I would say, popular, maybe 15%, 20% of people ask for a video, even if it's unpaid. It used to be 0. And so if it's required, you have no choice. Send it. If it's not required, my opinion is only send it if it's really good. If it's excellent, send it. If it's mediocre in any way, maybe you're not a great speaker, and that's okay. You don't need to be a great speaker for an unpaid engagement. You have to be a good speaker and somebody who can articulate a message and have good information. You don't have to be a great speaker. So if you're not a great speaker and you have a video that's not professional looking, and it could be done on an iPhone, but it needs to look like it's a good iPhone, it looks that it was done well. It's not fuzzy. If you don't have a great video, don't send it if you're not asked. It's just going to do more harm than good. That's my opinion. Getting back to the submitting of the proposal, if there's no formal call for speakers, the process may simply be you call up, you find out what the process is, you email someone, someone gets back to you, and you get an email from Mary Smith, and Mary says, so the process for submitting to our organization is send me, Mary Smith, an email 6 weeks before 6 months before the conference. And that's when you mark on your calendar that you have to send it in, and you start asking about deadlines. You start asking about all the questions that you need to know. We'll talk about some of that in a few minutes. So sort of some of the logistics. But this is emailing with an attachment your proposal. That's sort of the informal or less formal process, but it's still the way they want you to do it. So that's what you have to do. And if they have chapters, they may say you have to contact each chapter separately. Okay. Step 7, follow up continuously and persistently. Remember, you're one of many that are seeking that speaking engagement. You cannot underestimate how many people are seeking that slot. Thousands may be submitting for any given conference. And you want to increase the mind share and stay above the noise. You want to provide updated news. So let's say you are, let's say you're a HR speaker. You have a HR coaching business, and you were interviewed by HR executive. So that established credibility for you, just as speaking does. So you want to send the link to that article that you had published to the conference organizer, or anything else that you have, because that's going to give the organizer a sense of, hey, maybe I really need to have Carol on this session. Carol was just interviewed by HR executive, or the Wall Street Journal, or Business Week, or the Seattle Times, whatever it is. And it just adds to the credibility, right? It adds to your aura. It's really important to keep those things effectively in the mind of the conference organizer. All right, let's take a minute and talk about identifying opportunities. Before I do that, let me stop and see if anybody has any questions. I might want to think about something while I'm taking this opportunity. Anybody? Oops.
So this is really what we need, Steve. This whole idea of, because most of us right now are probably not responding to requests for speakers and stuff as much because we're not as prepared with the little library of we probably have one sheets, maybe, this is my speaker bio, this is my reel, some of that stuff that we need to just be ready. The idea of an abstract, like all of this is super valuable to us because the caliber of speaker that's at this event is way up here, but the amount of experience they have applying for gigs on their own is usually pretty low. So thank you. This is great.
Good. No, I understand now. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's fine. I've done presentations with no, questions at all, and then I realized, okay, well, a lot of times people ask questions because the speaker didn't cover something, and it just elicits all kinds of questions. So good to know. I appreciate you letting me know, Sherry, and I will continue. And again, don't hesitate to interrupt, and we'll have some time afterwards, obviously, for any open questions that do arise. Some of it, you're right. It is a lot to take in. I think a lot of people don't realize when they set out to be a speaker how much work is involved to do it right, or they send in a proposal and they didn't send it to the right person. They didn't send it to the person that actually is making the decisions, and it floats around and around inside the bowels of an organization until the deadline passed. And there's always a deadline. Actually, let me take a minute and talk about that.
Yeah,
So,
I was just I'm sorry, because
Yeah.
LaShawn, you have your hand up, so do speak to that first.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are not accustomed to planning that far out our speeches. So
Right.
yes, please speak to that.
Okay. So the average conference, again, we're talking about a publicly held conference, not something that you're going to do on your own where you might decide today, hey, 2021, great year for me to do webinar. 6 weeks from now, I want to have one out, and 2 weeks later, I'll do it. And you don't need a huge amount of time to promote. But large conferences with potentially hundreds or thousands of attendees, which all of you could potentially be presenters for, those conferences are planned on average between 3 months. I'm actually not going to give you the average. I'm going to give you the range between 3 months and 15 months, right? So between 3 months and 1 year, 3 months from now. So yes, there are conferences right now that are being planned for the second quarter of 2022. Yes, you heard that right. There are not too many, but there are many conferences that are being planned for the first quarter of next year. Local and regional conferences are typically planned between 3 and 6 months, closer to 6 months. National conferences are planned between 6 and 12 months before the date of the conference. When I say planned, I mean not having a bunch of people sitting around a table trying to figure out what the topics should be, or, and just the beginning stages. No, they are actually publishing the date of the conference. They have a good handle on what the theme is going to be. Now they need to fill it in with speakers and topics. And so they send out a call for speakers 6 to 12 months in advance. And you can look for those on the website of the organizations that you target. And we're going to talk about targeting in a minute on this next slide. But I wanted to, and I want to get the question answered that someone raised also first. But I just want to mention that every conference has a date and a location, but they also, in almost all cases, have a deadline date, even when it's not a call for speakers and it's a more informal, hey, just send Joe your proposal. You'll ask Joe, what's the deadline date? And he might say early August, if you asked him now. Or he might say August 15th. Those dates in some national conferences are immovable. If the deadline date is August 15th and you send in a proposal on August 16th, you are out of luck. I hate to be tough about that, but that is the case. What you need to do is, if you can't make that deadline, I would say half of the conferences out there will give you an extension if you ask for it a few days or a week in advance. Tell them that, you can't make that deadline. You are not free to be able to do that. Can you have an extra 2 or 3 days? They're not going to give you an extra week. They might give you an extra 2 or 3 days. Important to recognize that. And that's why you need to plan far in advance. It's not that I'm preaching plan far in advance because, I'm being a stickler for advanced planning. I happen to be a planner, but I don't always plan things way far in advance. I tend to be a procrastinator in many facets of my life. But you can't for a conference when there's a deadline. You have to meet that deadline. Does that mean you have to plan, 6 months before the deadline? No, you probably shouldn't, because things change, trends change, your content might change. But just be aware that there is a deadline. And if you start 3 weeks before, you'll be in fine shape. If you start the day before to fill out a form or submit something and there's a computer glitch, you're out of luck. So just be aware of that. Okay. Sherry, you said there was a question?
LaShawn, you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
I did have a question, and you may be planning to address this, but it popped in my head, so I thought I'd pop it on the screen.
Go for it.
In all the information that you're sharing, which is extremely helpful, and thank you so much for this back information behind the scenes. I was just curious, are there any overall turnoffs or like big no-nos that are, don't ever do this and certainly avoid doing that? Any of that in this particular arena?
Well, really, the main thing, yeah, okay, I'll give you two. So the number one, number two, and number three, don't do a sales pitch. Yeah, I can't say it enough, and I've said it in a couple of slides on purpose because it's so important. You really have to make sure that you don't do any kind of a sales pitch. So that's number one. Number two is to keep to the promise, right? So when you're a speaker, you're promising at least a couple of things. You're promising content based on your presentation abstract, based on that description. If you veer off of that too much, or even 25%, and you start going off on tangents, or in the case of some of the clients that I've worked with, when I sat down with them, so I have a training program where I teach people how to do this. I'll talk about that later. But one of the things that I do is I teach people how to do that. And I'll look at their presentation description or their actual presentation side by side. They might show me their PowerPoint, and they're out of sync, right? And so the audience is expecting A, and then you come in and you're giving them B. It's not good, right? It's not a good look. And you're going to disappoint the organizer and the attendees because they're not hearing what they expect. Okay? Oops. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's really good. I was trying to come off mute. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you for asking. All right. Anybody else before I go on to the next slide? Okay. So now we're going to go to how do you identify the opportunities? So you're all sitting there saying, okay, so he's saying target this and target that. He keeps talking about targeting, but how do I find all the possible opportunities? And for me, number one friend, Google. You may have your other search engines that you use, and that's fine too. Clearly, Google is the leader. And you can do an enormous amount of research on Google to find speaking opportunities. So you sit down and let's say you have you have a presentation on leadership, and so you type in leadership conferences, 2021 leadership conferences, and a ton of links come up, right? Ton of them, and it might be it may be every conference out there, and you go to their links and you start doing the research of finding out when are the conferences and how. And I could do 2 hours, which I do in my training, of how do you, once you identify it, where do you find the specific information that you need? But the way to start is at least identifying the event. And again, these are going to be public events. They're not going to be a private company event, because those are not going to be on Google. It's going to be a public event. It's going to be held by a conference association, a conference organization, or an association, or a college and university, nonprofit, what have you. And so, though, just Googling, you could be there for weeks. And I'm going to jump down to number 3.
Quickly, do you have any specific search terms that you recommend?
Conference.
Okay. Conference
and speaking, right? So let's take leadership. So 2021 leadership conferences. That's one. Another one, 2021 leadership speaking opportunities. I would also not put a date in. So if you want to see what's coming up in the next year, you could even put in 2022, because a lot of those are going to be posted already. I know it was just 2021 3 days ago. 2020, I mean. We're going to try to forget about that year. We're going to try to focus now on making this a great year for all of us. And hopefully you'll get a lot of things coming up on your search. But you don't also, you should not also put a date in. So you put in 2021 leadership conferences. You should also put in leadership conferences. Don't put a date in. Reason being is because if an organization has a conference coming up in the fourth quarter of this year, they may not have announced it yet. They may be one of those people that have, 6 to 9 months of planning. They haven't started the planning yet. They don't even have the date yet, and everything is up in the air these days because of hotel contracts and COVID anyway. So conferences are being scheduled even later in many cases. So by putting in no date, you just put in leadership conferences. If there was a conference in 2019 or 2020, that will come up because it's still recent. And that'll tell you, oh, if they did one in 2020, they're likely to do one in 2021. And they're likely to do it in the same time period a year hence. So the Google Alerts, I'm going to jump down to the third one, Google Alerts. Google Alerts is an amazing thing. Before I go there, Sherry, what do I need to do to get to see everybody's face again? Because I hit something that took it away, and I don't know what I did. What do I need to click on?
If you click up top where it says view, that's where you can change your view. So if you click view right now, I would like exit full screen or choose side-by-side gallery as your view.
That's what I was looking for, and I can't find view, which is kind of weird.
So it's at the top, not the bottom.
Right, I know. I have more, remote control, annotate, pause, and share, participants, video.
Okay, so it's below that. So that's view options. Somewhere below that, even within the frame of the conference, there should be another little word view.
Okay. Well, I am.
Another option right now is go ahead and stop sharing, and that way you'll get your gallery back, and you can look at us and then start sharing again.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think it's my screen, the way I have
exit
it
full
set
screen.
up.
Just try to hit escape and exit full screen. That might help.
Yeah, let me try that. Oh, that just got me.
Oh, that just made your PowerPoint escape, didn't it? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
That's my fault. I should have known that.
No, that's okay. It may just be the way my computer's set up. That's okay.
Sorry about
that. When I take it off the screen, I'll see everybody.
All
anyway,
right.
So Google Alerts. This is like a godsend. I think it's amazing. So I don't know how many people know Google Alerts. I was going to see people because I wanted to see people raising their hand, but that's okay. So the Google Alerts is great. Because what Google Alerts does is you can have an alert on anything, on any subject, right? So you could have a Google Alert on refrigerators, the latest refrigerators. I'm going off the conference topic for a second. You can have a Google Alert on anything, and anytime there's a press release, primarily they're tied into press release. Google changed their algorithms a bit a couple of years ago. It used to be more focused than that, but now it's still very useful. So what you can do is, let's say we use the topic leadership again. We'll stay with that. So if you want to speak to leadership conferences, then what you need to do is have a Google Alert called Leadership Conference. And if you just Google, if you Google the phrase Google Alert, a page will come up that will allow you to have any number of Google Alerts. You could have one, you could have 150,000. And each of the types of target audiences that you have, where you want conferences in those audiences, you can have a Google Alert for. So if you have a Google Alert for something called leadership conferences or leadership speaking opportunities, what will happen is every day or once a week, you can set it to however frequency you want it. I forgot which ones there are. You actually can get a daily Google Alert about that. And if there's a press release announcing a conference and a call for speakers, you'll get it. it's another way to find out about what's happening in your field in terms of speaking opportunities. All right, so we'll go now back to number 2. There are trade show directories, and the trade shows all have conferences for the most part. And there are some conferences that don't have trade shows, but these trade shows or event directories are very valuable. I just listed a few up here. TSNN, which used to be called Trade Show News Network, allconferences.com, bevents.com. Those are just a few. And you can go to those, and they're directories by topic, by location, by size, you name it. They're great. There are also directories that are online, totally updated constantly. They tend to be expensive, and they are accessible anytime you want. And if anybody wants to know who those are, I can, drop me an email. I'll be happy to send you a couple of names of companies that do that. One of them is run by Columbia Books. There's a specific URL that goes to their online database that you can purchase. And then, of course, association listings. There are 37,000 associations approximately in the United States alone. And so all of those associations have conferences. They're all looking for speakers. And you can get those listings in a number of ways. There are listings online. There's ASAE, which is the American Society for the the American Society of Association Executives, ASAE, and they have affiliates in almost every state in the U.S. They are not chapters, they're affiliates, and each of those affiliates are independently run, and they have conferences, and you can find all this stuff online. All right. And here are just some examples of events. These happen to be some marketing and technology events, Mixed, Brand Managed Camp, American Marketing Association has an annual conference. These are some of the kinds of events that I deal with, but many of you would be interested in, depending on your level of expertise, your topic. CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is actually happening, I believe, this week. That gets 400,000 people. The Big Show, which is the National Retail Federation show, Digital Summit, the Society of Human Resource Management. They have an annual conference, and then there are, for every national organization, there are literally thousands of chapters across the realm of national associations. So every chapter has, every association typically has, the large ones typically has chapters in all the large states. Many associations have chapters in every one of the 50 states, and sometimes they have multiple chapters in different states. So Society, the one on the end that I have on the last listed, SHRM, Society for HR Management, they have, for example, 5 chapters in California alone, because California has all those large cities. All right. So you want to maximize the speaking opportunity. You want to give the engagement a shelf life by having some takeaways of some sort. It could be an article. It could be a white paper. Oftentimes I give away articles that I've written or white papers that I've created on a blog or whatever. It could be something that you want to just hand out that people will remember you. But the main thing is, if 2 years from now you speak, if you speak now, I should say, this year, and 2 years from now someone says, who was that speaker that I heard? They think to themselves, I have no idea. Too much of life has passed by to know what's 2 years from, what happened 2 years before that. But if you have a file or a bookshelf and you can pull the takeaways, then that takeaway really had a shelf life, because now you'll say, oh yeah, that was that talk by Mary Smith, and you'll look her up and then you'll say, I want to talk to her now. I'm ready to have some kind of a connection with her, or she could provide me with the information that I need now for my business. Attend with a colleague when things go back to in-person speaking, then you want to be able to work the room with somebody else. And, networking will come back. People will want to, I think when it does come back, it's going to come back in a big way. People will, get on planes and they'll start doing the right things or the things that they feel are the right things to do for their own networking purposes. And they're going to want to go to conferences with somebody if you can. I mean, there's an expense involved, but if you have a small business with 2 or 3 partners, you may want to just have one of them come with you if you can. And they can, as I call it, work the room, hand out business cards, schmooze with the attendees and that kind of thing. I like doing press releases if you have a major presentations. I like being able to send out a press release to the publications and both online and in print that don't announce your speaking, but that have substantive information, right? So if you're doing a talk on let's say you're a nutritionist and you're doing a talk on the 15 healthiest foods and why, then you may want to do a press release where you're actually telling people, here are the 15 foods and a couple of words about both. It's not taking away from your presentation. What it is it's promoting your presentation. People will see that if somebody thinks a publication thinks that that's important information, they'll publish that, and they won't publish that you're speaking in August at the convention center in St. Louis without some substantive facts that they think their readers want, and that's important. You could do one before or you could do one after, usually not both. And then bring business cards. Again, I'm not going to hand you my business cards. I wish I could, but I can't. So when you can, bring lots of business cards. So for now, I can do the next best thing, which is to put up my slide, which is also in the Dropbox, my contact slide, which is what is the virtual version of a business card with my name, company name, my address, phone number. That's actually my office phone number where I haven't been for the last 9 months. I've been working from home. But I check messages regularly, and best way to reach me, however, is through email, which is on my LinkedIn, as well as my website. And I can, when I get into the chat room in a minute, I'll put my LinkedIn information in the chat room as well. But you could also just look it up on LinkedIn if you're a member. And you can find all that information on LinkedIn as well as on my website. So I think that covers my formal remarks, Sherry, and we have about, 15 minutes left for any questions or comments. If you don't have any questions, but you want to just talk about your experience in speaking and tell us what you've done, or the good and the bad, or something that relates to anything I say or said, or just want to talk about what you've done. Obviously, I'm sure the audience would benefit from hearing that as well. But thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Steve. This is incredibly valuable because you come from this arena of the conference speaker, and we actually started out backward from what most people did. We started with paid speaking gigs, but low paid speaking gigs. So there are a lot of people here that are coaches and have jobs, and they're moving into speaking. But there are many of us that have been these contract trainers for years. And so that's the thing we need to figure out how to do. What's the stuff I need? What's the timeline? How much in advance do I need to look for this stuff? So I assume that you guys are going to have quite a few questions, so let them roll.
And also, if you don't have any questions now, but you want to, I offer a 15-minute free consultation. So if you want to, you think of a question in the middle of the night, don't call me, but you can email me. And seriously, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, you have a question, just email me, or, we can arrange a Zoom call for 15 minutes, just answer all your questions about the world of speaking. I'm happy to do that. I'm also offering a 20% discount to the folks who registered, whether they're in this session or not. Sherry, I'm not sure if I mentioned that to you or not, but I'm offering a 20% discount off my training. I have a 2-hour training program and a 4-hour training program where I teach all the processes, techniques, and tips of the trade on getting both paid speaking engagements and unpaid speaking engagements. And that's good for the entire year. And that's a good part of my business. The other chunk of my business is bigger, medium-sized to large companies hire me to find speaking engagements for themselves. To hire me to get them speaking engagements. But because a lot of people are individuals, they don't have big budgets. A few years ago, I started this training coaching business where I teach people how to get it themselves. So it's sort of DIY. It's a more detailed, customized, that's the key thing, customized version of what I did today. So I'll take your particular expertise. It could be leadership for the financial services industry, or leadership for any industry, or any of the topics that you have. And I'll do some research on my own, and I'll be prepared, and I'll ask you questions, and we'll customize it to your own specific needs, and also to your knowledge need. If you're just starting out and this is all, brand new and your head is spinning, then, I'll customize it to that. If you know a lot of this already, then I'll skip some of those parts. So it's totally customized. Anyway, just wanted to throw that offer out there. I see Jeff's raising his hand.
Just real quick before Jeff, Sean asked the question, should we always include our one page? Like you mentioned, don't include your video unless they ask for it or unless it's awesome. So now with the question, should we always include our one sheet when emailing the contact for a speaking opportunity? What's your thought on that?
Okay, so I'll give a lawyer answer, yes and no. So it's yes if it's really good. It's the same answer as the video. Good is in the eyes of the beholder. I mean, one of the things that I do is I critique those sorts of things in the abstracts, because the abstract can also be a bad abstract if it's a sales pitch, which many times, the first time I read it, it is. I actually get hired by PR firms who outsource to me the speaker placement piece, because they're all about sales pitches, and I have to rein that in, because this is not a sales pitch. So if your one sheet's not a sales pitch, and it's good, I would say send it in. That one sheet was actually on the slide, I'm pretty sure, of paid gigs, right? You have to have a one sheet. If it's not a paid gig, then it doesn't hurt to have it. I think it helps if it's really good. And it should be really good no matter what. If you're sending it in, it needs to be really good. So it may be a confusing answer, but it really depends on who you're pitching. But if it's good, I would say, yeah, it doesn't hurt. But it's not something that you have to have for an unpaid engagement. You don't have to have it.
All right, Jeff.
Well, I have a couple of resources for one sheets if you need those. But my question, Steve, is how do we audition or apply to become members of your speaker bureau?
Okay, so at the moment, 2021, Jeff, I am not accepting any more additions to my speakers bureau. I am focusing most of my efforts on training folks like, consultants, independent consultants, coaches, trainers, to learn how to get speaking engagements for themselves, and for companies, the corporate marketing folks and the corporate PR folks who are responsible for getting their own speaking engagements for the senior management. That's where I'm focusing most of my efforts. The Speakers Bureau is more of a listing where people, companies, and associations, if they need a speaker, they'll look at my Speakers Bureau just as they might look at 25 other Speakers Bureaus. And I have a half a dozen associations that rely on me to provide speakers from that list, and even people who aren't on the list. But the criteria when and if I go back to adding to that list has always been some name recognition, or an author of at least one book that is of some note. and has some wide appeal within their expertise. Thanks. Anybody else?
He is a speakers bureau and he specializes in conferences. Anybody have any other questions for him?
Part of it could be overwhelmed. That was a ton of information. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's like the head's spinning.
Exactly. I saw a couple of heads do a little bit Linda Blair, for those of you who saw that movie. You have to be really old like me to have seen that movie when it actually came out. But seriously, you may think of 25 questions within the next 2 weeks. Don't hesitate to ask me. I'm happy to help. I like to give back.
I have a request. Thank you so much. That is a lot of information. My head is spinning, and I'm just going back and forth and trying to figure out some political type. But I have a one sheet currently, and just wanted to know if part of the services you're offering, would you be willing to critique the one sheet that I have that I've been using?
Yeah, absolutely. Just email it to me. I mean, it's something that I do all the time. If that's the only thing who was talking just now?
This is LaShawn Taylor.
Oh yeah, I don't see your face. You're on the phone. I see. Okay. LaShawn, just send it to me. I'll be happy to look at it. It's not something I'm going to charge you for. I look at these all day long and abstracts and so forth. So I'm happy to take a look at it.
Thank you. I'll do that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mark. Good afternoon. My name is Atala.
Hi, Atala.
Just wanted to say thank you because you stretched my mind and you gave me so much direction and clarity, and I really appreciate it. This is very, very valuable information.
You're welcome. Thank you for saying that.